Hello, my name is Lisa Rutledge. I'm a registered dietitian, health coach, and food behavior expert. And today I'd like to talk about how to eat well without dieting. The reason I call myself a health coach and a food behavior expert is because I find that the role of the registered dietitian, of the nutritionist, has really evolved over the last decade, quite a bit recently. And I find that registered dietitian doesn't quite encompass everything that I do. So I find that I really help people, coach them to find a way of eating that feels right and feels good for them. And I call myself a food behavior expert because how we eat and what we eat and why we eat are so much more than just choosing good foods or bad foods. That there are reasons why we're making certain choices with our foods, and there might be reasons why we want to improve our choices, or there might be reasons why we want to reduce some of our fears of those foods. So I find that understanding people's behaviors around food so much more important than what exactly they're eating. So I think we've all heard the expression or the saying that diets don't work. And that's really because both science and after 12 years of experience with many, many clients really state that diets don't help people lose weight in the long run. It's really only based on very short-term success. The likelihood of regaining the weight is very, 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 very high, which leads to a lot of frustration with many of my clients, and more importantly, perhaps, really pushes my clients to have a very skewed or unhealthy relationship with food. So we've heard that diets don't work. Why don't they work? Well, they tend to really wreak havoc on our mental health, on how we perceive our body, on the food choices we make, and in trying to follow a diet can actually push us in the direction of eating far worse for our mind and our body. And just to be clear, what is a diet? Well, a diet is any way of eating that restricts or forbids certain foods or certain ways of eating. So often the rules are very arbitrary. There are some diets out there saying that carbohydrates are bad. There are other diets out there saying that carbs are good as long as they're low GI or whole grains. There's rules out there stating, what time we should be eating. There are rules out there that deal with how much to eat and how big a portion size should be. And these rules really are rules that are made by someone else. They're not rules that we follow instinctively. These are not rules that we follow because our hunger levels follow them. They're really rules made by some sort of external guru. And when we follow someone else's point of view or someone else's advice, it kind of forces us to stop listening or ignore our own instincts, our own hunger levels, and even to ignore the foods that we enjoy. So to ignore our tastes and eat certain foods other people tell us to eat. So diets or restrictive eating is another word I tend to use, play very important physiological and physical as well as psychological effects. They have great psychological effects that interfere with the body's own weight regulatory system. So when we try to restrict our eating to control our weight, we're actually doing that to the detriment of our body's own ability to regulate its own weight and to regulate its own food. So I guess the biggest question is, if diets don't work, what does? What can help people manage their weight? What can help people feel confident in what they eat? What type of eating, what type of regime, what type of style of living can help people feel more in charge of their eating? To get to that answer, perhaps we can find the answer together. So first, let me ask you, for a diet that relies on you to ignore your hunger signals, where if you cheated and you ate something that was on the forbidden list, that was associated with you lacking willpower? Would you prefer when your physical and emotional hunger is often confused? Or would you prefer a way of eating where your physical hunger cues are practiced and listened to, where listening to hunger and fullness signals help to avoid weight fluctuations? Would you prefer to live in a world where food is moralized as good or bad, legal or illegal? Or would you prefer to live in a world or eat in a way where all foods are okay to enjoy and to eat? Where the quantity, the quality, and the frequency of how often you ate them were determined by your physical hunger, your satiety, so how full you were, how satisfied you felt, the taste of the food, your own values. Would you prefer to follow a diet that gives you a false sense of control over your weight, where your self-esteem and body acceptance is rarely improved if weight loss does occur? Or would you prefer to follow a way of eating that increases your self-esteem, where it's okay to be any size? Would you prefer a diet that leads you to distrust your body and your sense of judgment? Or would you prefer a way of eating where self-trust develops by understanding what hunger feels like and learning to respond to your hunger? Would you prefer a diet that's only a short-term solution and that usually leads to either weight regain or regaining even more? Would you prefer a diet that warps your relationship with food? Or a way of eating that has no wagon to fall off of or sense of cheating, where a non-judgmental and compassionate way to improve your eating is pursued? So I perhaps sounded a little some of those questions, but it's really the idea is to really put in perspective how damaging diets can be, how futile they are, how much of a lack of time and energy and money they can be. And at the end of the day, not only are they, a money waster and a time sucker and an energy waster, but they don't work. They don't allow us to get to a place where our body weight, our natural healthy weight or set point is kept stable. It does not allow us to improve our confidence with what to eat and when to eat. And mindful eating can really do all these things. Mindful eating allows us to practice listening to our hunger signals and interpreting how much food we need. It tells us that all foods are okay to enjoy and to eat. Mindful eating helps to increase our self-esteem, and it really advocates that all bodies are good bodies. And even though you may be in a bigger or in a body that you're not happy with, that it's okay and it doesn't have to change for you to be happier. Mindful eating is a non-judgmental way to improve eating. So instead of putting the microscope under, all these food choices that someone else has called bad, it really allows us to internalize those questions and say, how did I feel after eating? A food is not bad unless it was stolen or rotten. A bad food is just something someone's made up in their mind to sell a book, to cut calories, to help you feel safe with their rules, when in fact mindful eating can help us feel very safe and very confident with our food choices. Back to my question, if diets don't work to help us be healthier, be happier, what does? Well, I'm going to go back to what I just mentioned, mindful eating. Because mindful eating can help us connect with our physical cues of when to start and stop eating, as well as understand our psychological cues that can affect our food decisions. And I find that mindful eating is often a fresh way for people to think about food. It's an alternative way to think about food, and it really prevents my clients from walking down that diet path of disappointment. Some people call it intuitive eating, some people call it attuned eating, and some people call it mindful eating. One of the basic philosophies of mindful eating is to use true hunger to determine when we eat and how much we'll eat. It helps us to understand what the body needs and not only what does your body need, but what you feel like eating, what you want to eat is also taken into account when it comes to choosing foods. Mindful eating includes understanding why you want to eat when you're not hungry. And it really encourages, I guess, a very positive way of exploring those triggers of why do I want to eat when I'm not hungry. One really important thing to remember or to keep in mind is that these are not rules. It's best physically, mentally, psychologically, physiologically, it's best to eat when we are hungry, and it's really important to eat when we are hungry. But it's also very normal to eat when we're not hungry, to eat with emotions or because of emotions. So these are not tried and true rules that absolutely have to be abided by, but mindful eating or practicing intuitive eating can help us know when we're truly hungry and know when we're not. It can help us make those decisions of what do I feel like eating, what do I want to eat, what is available to me, and what does my body need. So let's focus on hunger levels. So it's really important to understand what hunger feels like versus what certain emotions feel like, because some emotions like anxiety or stress or tension can feel like hunger. And then the next step ideally is to not only know if you're hungry or not, but if you are hungry, understand how hungry you are, because hunger is not just a yes or no, on or off signal. It's a signal that generally increases with intensity if we don't feed ourselves. So interpreting the level of hunger you are at is also a really important step of mindful eating. And then with that sort of information, yes, I'm hungry. How hungry am I? Using that to help determine what I'm about to eat. How much of it do I need to eat, considering how hungry I am? And that's because different foods fill us up in different ways. Not only fill us up physically, but fill us up mentally. Our satisfaction level with certain foods is also different. So knowing how much food you need to fill that particular gap of hunger until your next meal or snack is a really great, powerful, empowering tool that mindful eating can teach us. One thing that's important to note is that having the confidence to rely on these body signals of hunger and fullness can be difficult and can be really scary too, especially if you feel that your hunger signals are always on high or your fullness level signals are very, very hard to hear. Practicing listening to hunger and not being scared of hunger and listening to fullness is important and can really bring us to a place of peace with hunger and fullness levels and cues. So it's not about not eating when you're not hungry. It's not about stopping before you're too full. It's about understanding, how hungry am I right now? How full am I right now? What would be good? What would I feel best eating? What do I feel like eating? And practicing that over and over and over again to come to peace with your decisions with food. So we can practice mindful eating. We can practice understanding our hunger and fullness levels by asking ourselves, am I hungry before I eat? Some people do that before each meal. Some people decide they'll ask themselves, am I hungry before one particularly difficult meal in a day or a snack or time of day? And some people like to use what's called a hunger scale to help determine how hungry they are. And a lot of hunger and fullness scales go from a 1 to a 10, but you can make that scale whatever you want. So the idea is that each number on that scale of hunger and fullness will correspond to a feeling. And ideally, we want to start eating before we're too hungry and stop eating before we're too full. Now, the idea with mindful eating is that if we do start eating when we're too hungry, to kind of understand what happened there. Why am I eating? Why am I starting to eat when I'm a 1 on a 10 for hunger? I'm starving, I'm dizzy, I'm irritable, I'm eating quickly, I'm not enjoying what I'm eating so fast I can't taste the food. What happened there? Why was I a 1? Or why am I always so starving when I get to lunch or get to supper? and dealing with the reasons. It's not that eating at a 1 is a bad thing or will make us gain weight, but it's probably a very uncomfortable situation where we can't enjoy our food as much. And if we're eating, for example, until we're uncomfortably full, maybe an 8 or a 9, we're so uncomfortably full, we have to loosen our belt, we feel overstuffed. There's nothing wrong with that moralistically or morally, but how do we feel? By feeling overstuffed and full after a meal, does that help us enjoy the meal more? Are we more satisfied because we're over full? Or does it perhaps take away from that food experience? Take away some of the joy and pleasure from that meal if we walk away overstuffed. And I'm talking about doing this on a regular basis. Obviously, once in a while, a few times a year, everybody's going to eat till they're uncomfortably full. But if this is happening on a regular basis, you might feel very uncomfortable physically, but you might feel very, in your mind, very uncomfortable with this chronic overeating. And just identifying how does it feel after a meal, or how full am I after a meal, can help determine if your portions were what your body and mind needed at that meal. So when we use mindful eating or intuitive eating to determine what we're going to eat, we have to take into account not only what our body needs, but also what we want to eat. So we can ask ourselves, what does my body need every day? I'm looking for a snack. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And what have I already had to eat today? What perhaps, is there a food group that I'm missing? Something that, I know that my goal maybe is to eat more fiber or to eat more omega-3. Maybe that will help determine in part what I want to eat. What have I already eaten? What have I not eaten today? But also, what do I feel like? Do I feel like something hot, something cold, something sweet, sour, crunchy, creamy? And what is available to me? What can I eat in this moment? Do I have something at my desk, in my car, in my bag? If I run down to the store, what are they selling? So not only what is around me and what's available in terms of budget and physically what's available, what does my body want, but also what do I feel like eating right now? And of course, we mentioned earlier, understanding why you want to eat without being hungry. That's something that is encouraged to be explored with mindful eating or intuitive eating. Am I eating? And this, again, this is only if this happens on a regular basis, every day or many times a week. If we're eating due to emotions, due to tension, due to stress, due to fatigue, due to thoughts of deprivation or feeling deprived. Are we eating as an act of rebellion because no one is there to see us and judge us? Are we eating because we have negative thoughts about our bodies, or we're rehashing our day and we realized, oh, I've cheated, I screwed up my lunch, so why bother trying? Are we eating because we're upset about some of the choices we made today or upset about tomorrow? And understanding why is really important. The idea is not to never eat when we're not hungry. That's not the goal of mindful eating. The goal is to understand why are we eating on a regular basis without being hungry, and understanding those, whether they be triggers to eat, whether they be thoughts or certain emotions. What is pushing us to want to eat when we're not hungry? Not because it's bad, not because we're going to gain weight. We're not worried about those things per se. Often people don't feel comfortable. It doesn't sit right with them to feel compelled to eat to answer all their problems, to cope with a problem. So this is quite a small, I apologize for the small text in this, but this is what I call, guys, a mindful eating food decision tree. So how to decide what to eat at a meal or at a snack. And these are some mindful eating questions, or I guess mindful eating-esque questions we can ask ourselves to help determine how much and what and when to eat. So we've already gone through, am I hungry? So taking a moment out before eating, before sitting down at the table, before walking into the restaurant to determine how hungry you are. What are the physical signs you're experiencing right now of hunger? Perhaps using a hunger scale to determine how hungry you are. Identifying your hunger before it gets to be out of hand or too much. And then asking ourselves, what shall I eat? What do I want? What do I need? What do I have around me? And of course, how we eat can determine how much we eat and what we eat, whether we eat in a way that's fueled with emotion or negative and bad thoughts. Are we going to eat by being distracted and doing something else, watching TV or answering emails? And of course, how much food do I need will probably be based on how hungry you are, what kind of food you're going to eat, when is the next time you're going to eat, and how do you want to feel after that meal. That to what a diet food decision tree would look like. The question is not, do I want to eat, but am I allowed to eat? Can I eat? And then in the diet kind of mindset, it depends on, are you allowed to eat at this time? Is the plan allowing you to eat? And if yes, you can eat only the foods that are allowed. And if you're not allowed to eat at this time, then no, you can't eat. And why would you even want to eat? Get some self-control. And I don't know if you see how negative or how different that message is. And if we go the other route of the tree is, can I eat? Well, is that food included in the meal plan? And if it is it the right time to eat? And if it is, then go ahead. And if it's not, again, why would you want to eat this food you're not allowed? Don't you want to achieve your goal? Have some self-control. Skinny people don't eat that food. And this way of thinking, this diet food decision tree is so negative and never addresses the true questions of, well, are you hungry? I feel like eating. Are you hungry? How hungry are you? Why do you feel like eating? Is there anything else that's troubling you? If we eat when we're not hungry, sometimes it will be sometimes it will help the situation. Sometimes it'll be the right decision. But if we're eating and it's not actually helping with the problem, if the problem is stress or anger or tension or sadness, then food is probably not going to always be a really great tool to help with the actual problem. If the problem is not hunger, food is not always going to solve that problem. Let's get rid of this diet talk, and maybe if we go through this mindful eating food decision tree with new eyes. So asking ourselves, am I hungry, by taking a moment to determine if we're truly hungry before eating, understanding what hunger feels like. What does fullness feel like to me? Literally making a list of how you feel when you're hungry, when you're slightly hungry, when you're starving. And then of course, if the answer is no, I'm not hungry, we still have many options. We could eat anyways. We could maybe find some sort of distraction that might help allow the craving to pass, or we could actually deal with the emotion. If there's an emotion or an actual problem like tension or stress or sadness or anxiety, could there be another way we could deal with this feeling or this discomfort without turning to food? Not because the calories, but because there might be a better solution. And if I am hungry, again, using a hunger scale to decide how hungry am I. Ideally, we want to decide how hungry we are before we're in front of the meal, before we're in front of the food, maybe before opening the pantry door or before sitting down at the table. One thing to keep in mind is that hunger cues are definitely easier to identify for some people than fullness cues. So practicing asking how hungry am I, and then also eventually practicing how full am I at the end of the meal. The fullness cues and listening and interpreting might be a little more difficult for the people who are just starting out with using mindful eating. Some foods are more filling than others, so hunger and fullness levels change from day to day. And that's why it's so important to kind of ask ourselves these questions, because a meal plan could certainly not fuel us and energize us and feed us the same every day without some problems. And going back to those three questions, what should I eat? Well, what do I want? What do I want to eat? And it is normal at first to crave only what is considered bad or forbidden foods, especially if it's been a long time since we've either eaten them or a long time since we've allowed ourselves to enjoy these foods. And cravings for these forbidden foods will decrease the more we integrate them in a calm and safe manner with less guilt. And I say safe meaning you feeling safe. When we feel guilty about a food, we want these foods more. We want what we can't have. We want generally to eat as much as of these guilt-ridden foods as we can, because tomorrow there won't be allowed. So asking ourselves, what do I want, can be tinted, can be difficult at first, because we're not used to. We are drawn to foods that we feel are forbidden or off limits. And the less and less we put foods in those categories, the less tempting they will be to choose. And the more clear it will come to us, what do I really, really feel like in this moment? Something sweet, something salty, something crunchy, hot, cold. What do I feel like? Instead of being just drawn to the forbidden foods, I'll be drawn to all foods in an equal manner. This takes practice, and it's normal to be fearful of it, and it's normal that there's almost a period of time when you are eating more of your forbidden foods if you've allowed them into your life again. And it's well worth a few weeks of eating more forbidden foods than usual in order to kind of get over this period of finding them fantastic. And allowing ourselves to eat them more allows them to be less fantastic, less of a draw, more like normal everyday foods. Again, what do I need? What have I eaten already today? Are there any food groups maybe that I missed? Is there something I tend to eat too little of? Understanding what our body needs can sometimes help us figure out what would be a great option for a snack. If it's hard for us to figure out what I feel like eating, this could be something kind of another way to figure out, at least temporarily, what would be an interesting option for the moment to eat. And of course, what do I have? What do I have in the house? What do I have around me? Of course, planning is key to satisfy your needs and wants. Planning and buying foods you enjoy. That can be a very scary thing for people. To keep foods that they normally overeat in the house, or keep forbidden or illegal foods in the house, can feel very scary to a lot of people. But I guarantee you, the more we avoid these foods, the more we'll be drawn to them, and the more we'll tend to overeat them through emotion and through deprivation. Having them more often generally allows us to be more calm about them. Now, the question of how will I eat can be dependent on our environment. So am I eating in front of the TV versus at a table? How will I eat can also mean how emotionally charged will my meals be? And physical state. Am I tired? Am I rested? All of these will really affect our food choices and even appetite levels. So being aware. Do different environments affect my eating? Do certain emotions when I sit down to eat, or physical states, does it increase the satisfaction of food? Does it take away how good the food makes me feel, or how good I feel after eating? And we can increase our awareness of how we are eating by checking in with our hunger and fullness levels throughout the day. We can decide before eating how full we want to be feeling after the meal. We can actually verify, or I would call check in with my body, on how satisfied mentally and physically you feel after eating a certain food. Is that what you expected? Was the cake as delicious as it was before? Was that meal as good as you expected? And reminding ourselves that it may not be. The more we build a food up as being forbidden and illegal, we're tempted, and it tends to taste better because it has this, halo or this illusion of being guilty and guilty pleasures. But when we take that away, sometimes it's a lot easier to be a true foodie when we take away the guilt with food, because we're actually able to taste it without that guilt. Taste it for what it is. And often foods become a lot less tasty when we're not eating them with a side of guilt. Some people like to eat with fewer distractions in a calm environment. Noticing the flavors and the smells and the textures of foods can help keep us present and mindful in the moment. And one thing that's really important to note is that our taste buds will actually change throughout the meal. The intensity of the food changes with each bite, and our taste buds are the most sensitive of the food, the most sensitive, receptor in our body to let us know when we're getting fuller, or when it's time to either change the type of food we eat, or maybe to slow down our eating, because the flavor intensity will change. And when we focus on the flavor intensity change over the meal, you'll probably notice you'll quite naturally slow down your eating and know when the end of the meal is there more naturally because the food's not going to taste as good. Actually, if I go back and I continue along that same grain of thought, is some people, we can get caught up in when we're eating a meal, we can get caught up in looking for the flavor intensity, the flavor blast of the first few bites. So if you find that you're continuing to eat a food because you're looking for that blast of flavor that came within the first few bites, that's something to kind of keep in mind as well. The last 3 bites will never taste as good as the first 3 bites. And sometimes we want that flavor blast for whatever reason, to calm us down, to give us a shot of pleasure, to give us something, that's fun and that we feel we deserve. And you find you're eating and the food is just, more food is not satisfying you more. Something to kind of consider as maybe one of the triggers for eating beyond fullness. Now, how much food do I need? That certainly takes a lot of practice, but it's very possible to learn how much certain foods are needed to satisfy you both mentally and physically. And leaving a meal feeling satisfied is amazing. Everybody wants to feel good after eating. The point of eating is to feel good. And when we feel stuffed, that doesn't feel good. So learning to know when's a good time to slow down my eating, when's a good time to take a break, because I want to enjoy this meal and I tend to enjoy it more when I leave feeling satisfied and full versus overstuffed. Some people will check in before they eat and determine how hungry they are and then ask themselves, when is my next meal or snack planned for? If it's in 5 hours, maybe I need a different amount of food than if it's just an hour away. And of course, observing what are we thinking, what are we feeling, without judging, because sometimes what we think and what we feel, I only have an hour to go, but I'm starving, but I should be good, but I really feel like this sweet. That can really affect how we eat and how much we eat. And if you do end up eating beyond feeling full, so feeling uncomfortably full, or beyond being satisfied, feeling guilty or ashamed or upset if that happens is very unuseful. It is not a very good tool to eating better. So it's best to kind of take that shame and that guilt away and be more exploratory and inquisitive in a positive way, going, I wonder what happened there. How come yesterday when I had supper, I was able to hear my hunger and fullness cues, to understand when I was getting full, to slow down my eating, to reflect on how full I was, and to stop. How was that different yesterday than today? Did I sit down at the table with a different frame of mind? Why was today different? Or why was this meal really going very well? And those are very important to explore. So I guess my big question for everybody is, do you want to improve your health and feel calm around food? Do you want to better hear your hunger and fullness cues? Do you want to feel confident when eating all sorts of foods in moderation? If you're someone who tends to binge eat, do you want to stop binging? Do you want to feel more comfortable in your body? Would you like to manage your feelings without turning to food every time? And if you answered yes to any of these, mindful eating can help you feel so much more in charge of your eating and your health. And although perhaps in typical culture these days, we say to be in charge or to be in control of our eating, we must be eating restrictively or following a plan. I not only question that, but I ask you perhaps to question that as well, given all the science based on mindful eating and how diets can really do not help us feel more in control, but usually more out of control. If you're looking for some mindful eating resources, there are some really amazing books and podcasts and blogs out there that you could explore and read at your leisure. The Center for Mindful Eating, it's a great website with tons of print information, videos you can watch. Am I Hungry is another great website run by Dr. Michelle May. Julie Dillon is a registered dietitian who has a great podcast. Marcy R.D. and Emily Fonsbeck are dietitians from the States who have some amazing blogs to follow. Some books you might find interesting is Eating Mindfully by Susan Albert, Intuitive Eating Programs by Mrs. Triboli. Linda Bacon has written some really amazing books called Health at Every Size and Body Respect. And of course there's Eat What You Love and Love What You Eat, written by Michelle May. So I hope that some of these tools are useful for you. And if you'd like to learn more, of course, you can visit my website, which is www.lisarutledge.ca. Feel free to shoot me a message or an email or find me on Twitter or Facebook, and it'd be my pleasure to answer any and all questions you might have, whether it be about mindful eating, about why diets don't work, or helping you get out of the diet cycle. It'd be my pleasure to do so. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great rest of the day.